Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Thomas. I'm particularly interested in Aquilegias, and I used to have the two national collections of Aquilegias that were in the UK. Unfortunately, there are now no Aquilegia collections, nor are there likely to because of Aquilegia Downy mildew. I called it a new killer disease. It was when I created this talk. Having said that, it's still fairly new. 2014 is when it took all of my Aquilegias, almost all. From thousands, I came down to about 20 in 1 year. It was also the time that I was actually on Gardener's World with my Aquilegias, and it was just such a sad time that at that time when people were beginning to hear of me is when I was losing them. So let's learn more about Aquilegia downy mildew and how you can try and stop it in its tracks in your garden. So here's my front garden where I used to live. I've had to move since because I lost it all in March, and the hellebores that year were absolutely fantastic. The Lenten roses of all colours right the way through the front garden as well as the back. Sometime when they're starting to go over, I'd go around the garden and I'd tie a circular string around each one of these plants and just pull the string up slightly so that it sort of hunched the shoulders of the plants, because I wanted so many other things to grow in between these plants. Having a small garden, you have to make the most of every space. And that is when I realised that my Aquilegia plants were hardly there at all. On the bottom centre, you can just see that there's some Aquilegia leaves showing. And later on, when I'd have gone round, these should have been large plants, but there were very few of them. There's a few in the centre of the courtyard there. But I'd planted about 70 new ones in this area alone in the autumn, and they had all disappeared. The plants that were there looked very unhappy. They didn't look right. If we look closer, we've got some curled leaves here, and they've been eaten by the culprits, in this case, slugs or snails. Now, that in itself is strange because basically Aquilegias are slug-proof. So what was happening here? Why was suddenly Aquilegias being eaten by the snails? Plants generally looked, well, crumbled and crushed and just unhappy. It actually took me about 6 to 8 months to find out what the actual symptoms were and describe them, especially because, as you'll see, it's almost like two different diseases. But I had no idea what this was. So it was also affecting some of the plants that I had potted up. That winter, I had potted up about 1,500 new seedlings ready for them to flower in the spring. And some of them were being affected by whatever it was that was infecting some of my plants in the garden. Here's another one. Again, it just looks crumbled, and if we look closer here, we have got what should be a flowering stem that is just sodden and brown. Here's a plant in my courtyard that's looking very healthy. It's one of the short ones. But next to it, a sister plant is not looking healthy at all. And when we look closer, we can see again these sort of crumpled, mouldy looking leaves, and as well as the ones in the background. And eventually there were sort of brown edges to the leaves, and they just were falling off. There was also some strange things happening to flowering stems. They were kinky, they were all curved and curled. This is a very strange thing, but something you can at least see from a distance. And here's one that's in flower with the same sort of effect. Some of the buds have actually been infected with whatever it is. And you can see that one of the reasons why this one in particular is curling is because that slugs have eaten half of the stem. So when I say some of the flower buds were affected, there is this. It could be a damage, but in this case, it's Aquilegia downy mildew. Some of the seed pods, instead of slowly ripening and going brown and dry, were having strange lesions on it. You might also see the same sort of brown lesions on stems and also on roots if you take those out and wash them. And inside these were unformed seeds. They were not viable seeds, so it was not producing seed, which is probably a good thing. Excuse me. So let's just go through some of the earlier signs. Now, I told you it was almost like having two different diseases. The first signs in your garden are extremely subtle. I showed these in a talk once, and then we were visiting gardens in the afternoon, and two people had these in their garden and they hadn't realised. And when people from the group saw these, they said, "Oh, I hadn't realised it was that faint." So if you look at my fingers, my dirty fingernails, you'll see the actual size of these lesions. You're not going to see them from much of a distance. It's angular and they're slightly yellowy, different shades of yellowy. On the undersides, here is the downiness of downy mildew. This is the sporulation. The spores are being produced and wafting around your garden at this stage. Don't wait until this happens. It doesn't happen in all conditions. You need wet leaves on the top, and that can also happen, of course, in the greenhouse from watering as well as from dew and rain. I have seen sporulation occur in every month of the year in my mild Swansea garden. This is a very dreadful disease because it will spread very rapidly and easily. Here's some more of those subtle, angular, yellowy lesions on the flower, on the leaf, sorry. And again, from the underside, not any sign here of any spores, but you can see that there's a slight yellowy irregularity there. What this actually is the fact that downy mildews, unlike other sorts, will grow inside the leaf. So it's growing in between the top and the bottom layer of the leaf. Now, this also explains why slugs and snails will eat them, because yummy, yummy, it may be a poisonous plant, but look at all of that wonderful mycelium inside there, and that's protein, and that's really good for them when they eat it. Here's another sort that is more rarely seen, at least around in my garden, where it's more in this area of the leaf and spreading out from here. And again, you can see some of it, but very subtle on the underside, and no sporulation. Powdery mildew is totally different, and it's more like a sort of fine spider web, cobweb type of effect, more on the top of the leaf. So this again is downy mildew, angular lesions. But here we can see them starting to go brown, and eventually those browner parts will die off. That's the plant trying to fight back. Okay, it can't do anything to fight the actual infection, but what it can do is to kill off its own leaf lamina at that point. Unfortunately, as it does so, as it browns and drops away, it probably carries plenty of spores from the infected tissue. But at least it has a way of stopping it. Okay, later sign of systemic infection. So systemic, it's in the system, it's in the meristem of the plant. So every new leaf is infected the complete amount, not just in those lesions. So let's see what that actually looks like in practice. Here we've got one in spring. The primulas have just finished flowering. This is a new plant coming up, but it is looking very sickly. The things to take on board is instead of a yellow angularness, it is now a general whitey green. There's other things to look for as well. The leaf lamina, the amount of greenery in the leaf, is much reduced, and yet the leaf stems are elongated. So when we're looking here, we can also just begin to see there may be a slight beginning of curling to the leaves, and we'll see more of that later on. So this is systemic infection. There is only one thing to do at this point, probably at those earlier points as well, but definitely at this point, take it out. RHS say the best thing you can do is to burn these if you have an incinerator there and ready. Secondly, you can bury it, but more than a good couple of spade spits deep. And thirdly, if you've got compost recycling with your local authority, then they will be able to heat everything hot enough to destroy spores. Don't get rid of all of the soil around the roots, because the roots themselves will probably be infected as well. So don't wash off the soil from the roots. Just get rid of the worst. Not totally in focus, but again, it gives the idea. Here we've got a red-stemmed one. That's probably one of the American sorts. So we've got quite long leaf petioles here, but quite small leaf laminas. This is new growth in the spring. You can see there's not much else growing around. And also some of them are already beginning to look very unhappy indeed. And here we've got a slightly later form, but you can see that we've got a curling of the leaf. And at this point, it's curling upwards rather than downwards. That's quite typical. So much more curling here. If we look closer, again, sorry it's out of focus, but I'm sure you can get the impression. This one curls back and then curls forward. And also, I think you can probably see it's beginning to die back around the edges. We've got lesions on this stem, which is probably why this one's dying back. But more typically, what will happen is that this leaf lamina will die back at this point from the edge inwards, as part of the plant trying to contain the disease. It looks blighted or blasted. And here's another one, first thing in the spring, coming up, and you can see the dieback of the leaf lamina and looking very unhappy there. And this one has already gone. So Aquilegia downy mildew, the end. I'm hoping that it isn't the end of Aquilegias in the UK. It's only in the UK and Germany at the moment, as well as in the Far East, which is probably where it arose, and then came over here where we have no resistance in our plants. Now I'm just going to come out of this and take you into a little bit more information of how to find out more information about it. I was so devastated after losing everything that I have created not one web page, but 12 web pages about it. Everything you always wanted to know. The unfortunate part is that probably you wanted to know it before you had to look up the information. Because it seems that most people will find my website pages after they have had their Aquilegias destroyed by this. So you're looking for a website, Touchwood Plants. And I am still selling Aquilegia seeds. Here's my seed list page, and there's lots there. Having said that, there is a very small risk of transferring this via seed. Certainly, if any seedling comes up discoloured, almost pale leaflets, get rid of it straight away. But it's a very, very small risk, and I certainly don't recommend that anybody buys any Aquilegia plants. I've seen them for sale in so many places because it's very subtle to start with, the symptoms. So if I go back to my home page, you'll see here a link for Downy mildew. You'll also see it from the Aquilegia seed page. So let's click on that one. And this one is Aquilegia downy mildew in a nutshell. Well, my nutshells are very large ones. But you will see all of the information you need, but then I've got other more specialised pages that I'll just mention later on. So all of the things that I've already shown you in the slide talk. Some really bad ones here where all of the leaf lamina has gone. Here's more information about the lesions on the stems. More about the buds. Sometimes you will get some seeds still viable. I suggest they don't get sown. So I'm just going down through to the end of the page. There's lots of good information on here. Please use that and tell friends about it if they need to. I'm also asking that people email me if you do have this disease, and also send photos, because I can usually 8 or 9 times out of 10 tell you straight away on the photos if it is, if it isn't, or if it may be. Use the RHS member service if you're a member as well. So here are my other web pages about Aquilegia downy mildew. So this one is my main one. I'm looking more closely at the signs on the leaves. Another one for, we can get variegated leaf Aquilegias, and just comparing the symptoms of downy mildew with variegation. And on flowers and buds and effects on the whole plant. A case history of 3 plants dying. There is no cure. There is nothing you can do. Systemic infection in plants, and particularly as they emerge in the springtime, because that's the first case that you'll probably know that you've got it in your garden. Seedlings, I'm waiting to find a photo if I can get any. Looking at the leaves actually look more like maidenhair fern leaves. They're quite small laminas. And we're just looking here at the different types of Aquilegia leaves, because some Aquilegias tend to have that sort of leaf anyway. And also, I just want to delve into this one, the downy mildew directory, the area of infection. Now, I have not updated this since 4 months after I started this web page. That is in 2015. Having said that, I am keeping notes of everybody that contacts me, and especially if they've got photos, I'm keeping all of those. So sometimes perhaps I will get around to this, or perhaps somebody will. Believe you me, it's almost everywhere. I'm not sure that I've had anybody from Ireland as yet. This is now 2023, and it's February that this is being recorded. It is found in Scotland, but very few and far between. There is no cure. The only thing you can do is get rid of infected tissues and be very careful about passing on seeds, for example, if you could have this in your garden. So I'm just going to show you very briefly, all of this is in county alphabetical order. So we've got Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, down to Cardiff, Derbyshire, Devon, Dorset, East Anglia. So south of Britain, that's where a lot of good gardeners are. And the M4 corridor, very good area for getting Aquilegia downy mildew. Essex, Hampshire, Hertford, lots in Hertford. Isle of Wight, it's gone over that water. Kent, Lancashire, London. How did I get it in my garden? I bought plants. Plants that Aquilegias that aren't very easy for me to overwinter. The big Americans saw, and I bought and brought in Aquilegia downy mildew. Surrey. And of course, Surrey is also a big area for gardeners. And these photos that I put on this page are people's own photographs. This was actually on golden leaves. So you can get golden leaves Aquilegias, and you can't really see the lesions until they start to brown off and die. But here we've got the systemic ones. This was in Kew Gardens. I let them know that they had the problem. I went through the whole, or as much of Kew Gardens and reported back on any areas where I thought they may have more problems to keep a lookout. And very close by, we've got Wisley Gardens. Yeah, this was only very soon after anybody knew about Aquilegia downy mildew. One would like to think that they keep on top of it now in these places, but it's not easy. You will see these in gardens you visit. If you ever see it in your neighbours' gardens or other gardens, please let them know and they can check it out. And hopefully we can stop the spread that way. Please share all of these links, and thank you very much for watching about Aquilegia downy mildew. Thank you. I'm signing off now. Carrie Thomas, who used to have the only national collections in the UK.